Today is November 17th, 2011, and we are at Glenville State College interviewing Mr. Keith Wenner about his military service for the West Virginia Veterans Legacy Project. Mr. Wenner, I'm pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay. What is your full name as it is listed on your birth certificate?
Keith Harry Wenner.
Okay. Do you currently or have you ever had a nickname?
Oh, yeah, too many.
Too many?
Yeah, it depends on where I was stationed.
Okay.
I worked with a crew where we had multiple Keiths.
Uh-huh.
So instead of, if you're on a tower working high steel and somebody says, Keith, let go of the rope, and the wrong Keith lets go of the rope, somebody's hurt.
Yeah.
So, I went by my nickname Harry,
Uh-huh.
or my middle name Harry then, and then went to another base, and I got stuck with the nickname Dog, so that was my name there. And then next base, I've had too many of them, so, and then somebody would say, yeah, you know this guy, and they'd be like, no, and then they describe who they're talking about, and they'd say, oh, you mean Harry?
Uh-huh.
And they're like, no, that's Dog, so,
Uh-huh. Oh, interesting. So a lot of those came about, as you were saying, specifically because of your military service.
Right, and where I worked or who I worked with.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Okay, all right. Where were you born and raised, sir?
Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, northeast PA.
Okay. Moving further ahead, what brought you to West Virginia?
When my wife, I retired before meeting my wife, and when I met my wife Jennifer, she was still active duty,
Uh-huh.
and we were talking about where we'd like to settle down. We knew that we liked the hills, the mountain area, northeast Pennsylvania, you're talking Poconos and all the way down through, and so we started looking online. Her last assignment was in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
and we looked online, try to get the most bang for the buck. She wanted to use her GI Bill
Uh-huh.
and go to college, so we tried to find nice property near a college which had the degree that she wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and we just happened to trip over Glenville.
I see. Okay. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I was kind of curious. Did you meet your wife through the military somehow?
Yes, I had retired,
Uh-huh.
but I became a contractor working for the government, installing equipment that I used to install as an active duty airman.
I see.
And we just happened to be in Lodges Field, the Azores, and my wife was stationed there at the time, working, doing basically what you're doing now, doing interviews. She was the radio DJ,
Mm-hmm.
and she also helped run the television station there. And she had a part-time job working at the Non-Commissioned Officers Club at night, DJing, for like karaoke and country night and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I met her.
I see. Okay. Did you? I'm moving. We're going to jump back and forth, of course. But when you left the military, how did you remain connected? Did you become connected with your next job because of that too?
Yeah, actually, when I first left the military, I retired. One of the kids, I say kids, one of the young men that worked for me
Uh-huh.
got out of the service early. He only did 4 years, but he started his own job doing the things that we used to do active duty.
I see.
I was, outside plant construction, anything that had to do with communications,
Mm-hmm.
we installed. So he started his own install company doing telephone line, and when I retired, he asked me, he said, hey, I need some management help, some skills, and come work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I stepped out of the door Air Force and went to work for a kid that I trained and worked for a year with him.
Uh-huh.
But I kept in touch with my boss, my old boss. I used to, play golf with him and, just chat. And he said there was a job opening with Science Application International Corporation,
Uh-huh.
and they were interested. He had told them about me. They did an interview, and then I went to work for them and started doing installs all over the world again.
I see. Okay. Well, backtracking, you You entered the service in 1979, correct?
Right out of high school.
Okay. Can you describe what led you to join the military? Did you have family members previously in the military, or?
I had an uncle who worked in the Guard.
Uh-huh.
I had another uncle who did 20 years in the Army. My grandfather and great uncles and things like that, you know. It wasn't really because I was patriotic and wanted to join. At the time, you're talking late 70s, early 80s,
Uh-huh.
you know, northeast Pennsylvania, you know, predominant coal mining areas, you know, not a lot of opportunities and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't want to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
So my buddy and I, you know, sat down, we were talking about it, and we said, hey, you know, let's join the military,
Uh-huh.
learn a skill, get a trade. You're paid to learn the skill and trade,
Uh-huh.
and then, you know, get out of the service, and, you know, we'll be one step ahead of everybody else and go to work. Well, I went in, I never went out.
Uh-huh.
I stayed 21 years.
Uh-huh. Okay. What led you to the Air Force? I mean, opposed to other branches.
I don't know, it's kind of funny. You know, wasn't any wars going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see myself as a Marine. You know, I consider the Marine a cut above. You know, Army, to me, at the time, I considered, I don't want to be, you know, degrading to the Army, but, you know, I thought they were below me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to spend my time on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can tread water, but not for that long.
Uh-huh.
You know, so the Air Force just seemed like a good choice. And I had actually gone to the other recruiters and asked them what jobs they had available.
I see.
You know, and when I started sorting out who had what, you know, and I didn't go in with my eyes closed. I had a good picture of what I had to do in each branch of the service.
Mm-hmm.
So the Air Force was a natural fit.
Okay. All right. Where did you attend your basic training at, sir?
Down in Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
Okay. Can you provide a description of that? I mean, how did you feel about that? So
I actually thought, once I got into basic training, I thought, what am I doing here? I should have joined the Marines, because the Air Force basic training to me was a joke.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it was kind of like attending college classes with just a little bit of physical, activity
Mm-hmm.
combined in with it. You know.
Okay.
So I could almost compare it to the kids now going to college and playing a sport.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're having to learn something, which we had to learn in the Air Force, you know, the creed and
Mm-hmm.
all about the Air Force, plus, you know, be active and participate in, you know, physical activities, you know, running and then the shooting part, you know, when they take you out to the range to actually use a weapon. I was born and raised in a farm in Pennsylvania, so that was second nature,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I actually, you know, thought basic training was a joke.
Had you been involved in hunting and things like
Oh
that
yeah,
growing up?
all my life, yeah, from, you know, the age of like 12.
Uh-huh. Okay, all right. I mean, did anyone, in your memories, you don't have to name any specific person or anything, but, did anyone struggle, you know, in the basic training you went through?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, some people just can't follow directions.
Uh-huh.
You know, like my father says, you can tell them, but you can't tell them much.
Uh-huh.
You know, you could, you know, spell it out for them, put it in black and white, and show them twice, you know, still not get it right, you know. So
Mhm.
it's just, you know, just wasn't for some people.
Yes.
You know, so we had a couple fall out, you know.
Uh-huh. Okay. Moving on from basic, what was your first memorable assignment?
My first assignment was Germany,
Okay.
and that was kind of by accident, because when you're in tech school, they give you, you know, they send you down, they set you down, and they say, okay, this is what's available to your job description.
Mm-hmm.
So you apply for locations. And I had an assignment to Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the guys that was in the class with me had an assignment for Germany. And they had a system that you could do a swap. You know, because it's a 1-for-1, same rank.
Uh-huh.
You know, just trade assignments.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle married a German. I had family in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to go to Japan or, you know, the Far East really bad, so we just swapped jobs. I ended up going to Germany.
I see.
And it was great.
Okay.
You know.
So you don't have any regrets about that decision?
Oh, no. I spoke a little German. I took German in high school.
Uh-huh.
You know, so when I got there, it was, oh yeah, perfect.
Okay. How long were you in Germany?
2 years.
2 years. Did you work with any foreign nationals while you were there?
Yeah, we, you know, every base hires a percentage of local nationals
Mm-hmm.
to do the jobs on the base. You know, so we got to know the people. You know, and that's one of the reasons why my wife and I are sponsoring a high school exchange student from Germany this year.
Uh-huh.
You know, because we were both like, yeah, my wife was assigned to Germany. She had an assignment there once, and I'd been there.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, had nothing but good things to say about, you know, the people and the way they were treated, you know. So it was like, well, let's give back, you know, because they gave so much to us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What did your duties pertain to while you were in Germany?
I was an installer, so built towers, worked in like 7 different countries.
Mm-hmm.
I was stationed, my home base was Germany,
Mm-hmm.
but while I was there I worked in Belgium, Holland, Italy, all over Germany, Spain. Yeah, I think that's about it as far as going TDY. But, you know, while I was there, I got the opportunity on a furlough to go to France.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as a young man, you know, 19 years old, I went to see the Louvre, you know, and the Eiffel Tower and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, going through Germany, I went to see where the, you know, went to see where they had the trials after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and went to see, you know, Hitler's, the Eagle's Nest, you know, and where Patton stayed when Patton was there, and
Mm-hmm.
in Belgium went to see where the Battle of the Bulge was, you know, so it puts a different perspective on things. You know, you read about it in high school and in college, you know,
Uh-huh.
it's all in the book, but when you actually walk the grounds and see where the battle took place, yeah, it's something totally different.
Uh-huh. Okay, so a lot of those things you saw and you mentioned that you did was done during your downtime.
Right, yeah, on the weekends. During the week, our, you know, depending on the project, if it was something really, really pressing,
Uh-huh.
we'd work, you know, 7 days a week, you know, for a month or two. You know,
Mhm.
but normal work, we'd go out and we'd, just like a job here, you know, you'd work maybe a 10-hour day, and you'd have your, you know, Saturdays and Sundays as downtime,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to kind of decompress.
I see. What were your living arrangements there? On base?
When I was in station,
Uh-huh.
we had, it was an old World War II German Army barracks. We had 4 men to a room.
Mm-hmm.
There were large rooms. And we had a community shower,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a bathroom with 10 shower stalls and sinks and toilets and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was 4 men to a room. You know, everybody had their own bed, everybody had their own dresser,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just like mob living, mob dorm.
Uh-huh. Okay. Is there any comments you'd like to make about that? I mean, any experiences? with
No,
living
you,
arrangements?
military is, you know, if you walk in with blinders on, you know, and you don't want to have anything to do with, you know, people and places, you know, you're missing out because, you know, I knew a couple guys over there who wouldn't leave the dorm.
Mhm.
You know, their life was work and back to the room, work and back to the room. They didn't want to go out, see anything that had to do with, you know, be out on the economy,
Mhm.
you know, spend time with the local nationals, interact with anybody at all.
Mhm.
And all they could do is say, this is a terrible place.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, idiots.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any experiences you had during your downtime with local nationals that you?
Oh yeah, I'd be down at the, you'd go to the pub,
Mhm.
you sit around and, Germans would come in and start talking, and my buddies and I, we'd sit down and we'd arm wrestle, like, just,
Mhm.
I'll beat you tonight, we'd arm wrestle. And the Germans would see arm wrestle and then they want to join in,
Yeah.
And you'd sit around arm wrestling, and the Germans would be arm wrestling, talking to you. And I just spoke enough German and I understood more than I could speak,
Mhm.
to get by. And, and we'd have a conversation, how are you, what are you doing, and, buy each other beers and just, you fit in. And the next time you see them, it might not be for 2 or 3 months,
Uh-huh.
and I remember you,
Yeah.
come over here, sit down,
Uh-huh.
have a beer,
Uh-huh. Okay, great. Moving on past your 2-year stint there in Germany, what was you assigned to?
I came back from Germany to Langley Air Force Base, Virginia,
Okay.
and I worked as and our shop there was mostly antenna maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
and we maintained 12 TAC air bases throughout the United States. So from there, I traveled to California, Idaho, Texas, Nevada, South Carolina, North Carolina. There's got to be a couple more states in there that I can't even think of right off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And all we did was maintain equipment which was dealt with ground-to-air communications for the flight lines.
Uh-huh. I guess it would have been variable, but I mean, was you sent sometimes alone or with a group of 3, or I mean?
It was usually 3 to 5 man crews depending on the job.
Okay.
And at that time I had made some stripes, so I was, usually the middle guy on the team. We had somebody who outranked me running the show and somebody who was under me working.
Uh-huh. Okay. Since we were talking about rank a little bit, what was your basic opinion of the officers you dealt with throughout your career?
Like any other place, you've got some people who are, that you would go the extra mile for, and then you've got a couple that you would rather run over.
Uh-huh. Yes.
It's like any other profession anywhere else. Like working here in the college, I'm sure you can, off the top of your head, when I say 5 or 6 people that are the greatest people in the world you would do anything for, you'd think them right off the top of your head.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 1 or 2 that you'd like to hit in the head.
Yes.
Okay. It's like any other job.
Okay. Were you aware of any of them that had been promoted through the ranks?
Yeah, we had a captain that I worked for at the time who went in as an enlisted man,
Uh-huh.
got his college degree, and then went from stripes to stars,
Uh-huh.
and became an officer.
I see.
But
did you feel like he had more of a relation, or?
no, he was one of the guys I'd run over.
Okay.
Okay, just because he thought that he knew everything of both worlds,
Uh-huh.
and
Just happened to be that personality.
just happened to be that personality, right?
Okay. Did you have any other deployments throughout your career?
Yeah, I deployed my whole career.
Uh-huh.
I was in one of those jobs that made it, we were on the road, 200 days out of the year.
Wherever you were needed?
Wherever we were needed, whenever we were needed, we were on the road.
Okay.
So when I left Langley Air Force Base, I went to the Philippines. And, luckily a lot of the construction was right there on the base in the Philippines. So instead of sending people on temporary duty from Japan, they actually made a forward deployment in the Philippines, and that was where you were stationed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I mean, from the Philippines, I went to Korea. From the Philippines, I went to Thailand. You know, working. From the Philippines, I went to Australia, working. I went to Wake Island, Hawaii, Guam. You know, so I was still deployed.
Okay, well, for the sake of time, I mean, I could keep you here all day and go over every single place, but just, is there anything that any one place or any certain instances you would like to share that have stood out throughout that career and those many deployments in many different countries?
I tell everybody I'd go back to Australia tomorrow if somebody would give me a job there. You know, just the people there. I found that it doesn't matter what country you're in, if you treat people with respect, they treat you with respect. You know, like comments before, every company, every branch of the military has great people, and they also have idiots. You know, so if you ever have dealings with a person, you know, say from the Marines who just struck you wrong, that's one person. That's not the entire United States Marine Corps. You know, same thing with the Air Force. If you have dealings with one idiot, that's not the entire Air Force. That's one person out of all the Air Force. You know, I've worked with great people. I'd go back tomorrow. Miss the camaraderie. You know, in the military, you know where you stand. You know, I mean, you've got it on your sleeve, and everybody understands what your position is. You know, there's a line that won't be crossed. You know, and as long as you're
in that chain, you know
you're
where
in
you're
that
at.
chain, you know where you're at. Once you step out the door and you become a civilian, you know, there is no line. You don't know where you stand, and you know, you're on your own.
Okay. Was there ever any instances with, I'm sure you had many interactions with many different nationalities, but is there any instances where communication was a problem? You know, there was language barriers and...
Well, there are language barriers here in the States too, you know. Thinking off the top of my head, you know, rolling up to in the Philippines when they ousted Marcos. I was there, and they had security lockdown checkpoints everywhere. You know, and you roll up on a local national Filipino army, you know, checkpoint, and you're trying to explain that, you know, I need to go to this location, you know, to set up the communications for what he is doing. And you're not getting the point across because, you know, he speaks Tagalog and not English, and you don't have a translator there, you know, and there's 3 of them and 3 of you. They've got weapons and you don't, you know, and but it's imperative that you get through that checkpoint to set up their communications so they can talk to the people in charge, you know, and you just gotta, you know, keep a calm head to kind of like, okay, you know, well, just relax, we'll get through this, you know. But, you know, I've had, you know, I can, you know, tell you stories. I almost got killed 2 or 3 times, you know, on the job kind of accidents, you know, and I've worked with, you know, people. Well, unfortunately, I've lost contact with, you know, quite a few of them. Others, I like went through tech school and my first assignment with. Still my best friend. He lives in New Hampshire. You know, it's just like, you know, when you go to school, go to college, play in a team with somebody, you know, you make friendships and you're gonna stay in contact for the rest of your life, you know.
Okay. Is there any comments about any of the places that you stayed overnight, the living arrangements that you provided? I mean, any that stood out or possible?
Oh, when it always depended on location as to where you were going TDY, on temporary duty. I stayed in a hotel in Australia that there was nothing but a room about this size, 12 by 12 block, cinder block room with 2 beds, a nightstand, a partitioned wall, a shower, and a toilet, and that was the room. Concrete floor, concrete walls, no amenities, that was the room. And then I stayed in a 4-star hotel in Bangkok, Thailand, you know, working in Thailand. You know, so you never knew what you were going to get where, you know.
Well, until you got there.
Until you got there. You know, we all knew how much we were going to be paid for being on the road because that was in a book. That was automatic. You could say, okay, the on the road, the per diem rate for Australia was this much money. The per diem for Bangkok is this much money.
I see.
We knew what the financial aspect was. We didn't know what the accommodations were going to be when we got there until we got there.
When you were in these other countries on temporary duty assignment, how much of your own funds and money did you have to spend? Any at all, or?
Out-of-pocket expenses when you first got there were, you know, your money. So, you know, you had to be careful on how you spent. But when you came home, you filled out a travel voucher, you know, what you did, where you were, how much you spent, and then you got paid.
I see.
You know, so you could draw advances on your pay. You know, if your orders say you're going to be there 30 days, you can draw up to half of your money in advance to help you, you know, defray the cost. But I was in Italy for 88 days going from mountaintop site to mountaintop site, and I drew advances on my pay to help defray my cost. And one of the guys that I worked for at the time, he was a single man with a couple extra stripes, so he didn't have to draw any advance. He spent his own money.
I see.
And when he got back, he got a $12,000 paycheck. You know, that was just, okay, here's the money we owe you.
Did you find yourself, or was you ever permitted to, you know, buying goods and things at these various spots?
Oh yeah, you know, we my wife still complains. I have things from Thailand, you know, like mementos and stuff stuck in the garage. You know, we've got. She was in the military, also 20 years in the military. We've got rugs in the house that if you went downtown here to a really good shop, would cost you a couple $1,000s. She picked them up for a couple $100. You know, same thing with me. You're on the weekends. You can go downtown. You go to the bazaars, you know, and walk through the markets and things like that. And it's like, oh, isn't that nice? Pick it up and put it in a box, and 20 years later, you're digging through a box. You're like, oh wow, I remember when I bought that.
So it's almost, you know, varied from place to place, and you could run into some awesome stuff.
Oh yeah, you know, stationed in Germany, the big thing was that people bought like grandfather clocks, you know, big ticket items like that over there, a fifth of the price what you'd pay in the States for the same item. You know, in Turkey, you know, brass, the rugs. You know, my wife was in, you know, all the stands out, you know, Afghanistan, you pick a stand, you know, so go to the bazaars there, you got, you know, the really nice rugs.
I mean, was there any trouble getting that stuff back?
No. I mean, some items they scrutinize more than others, you know, but when you PCS, when you went permanent change of station from one country to another, you know, they packed everything up and shipped it for you. You know, so when you came back to the States, you know, you just bring it back in your household goods. It's like everything else. You know.
I see. Okay. Like you said, when you entered the military, you'd only planned on staying a few years, but you ended up spending, you said, over 20?
21.
21. I mean, after a certain point, when did you finally realize that I think I'm going to stick it out?
Well, I joined the military, and I got married shortly after I joined, and I had a daughter. And I'm like, looking at my career field, what I was doing, it just seemed like a good fit to me. I had a steady paycheck coming, depending on where we were stationed. I had housing that was assigned, that I didn't have to pay for. Certain bases have housing, certain bases don't. But they'd supply you with a house, and they'd maintain the house, and you just pay for all the others, your groceries, your electric, or your groceries. If you need telephone and cable TV, you paid for that, and you paid for all your other incidentals, and the house is paid for. So it was just a whole lot easier on me, and I enjoyed the military. I enjoyed 99% of the people I worked with. So.
All right. Did you? When did you realize you were going to retire? And I mean, how far ahead of time did you plan that? And I mean,
it wasn't very long ahead of time at all. I worked at the time in the military with several people who had retired. They retired out of active duty and stepped into a position of authority, but as a civilian working in the same place.
I see.
And I just sat down one day and I was talking to the two of them and I said, "When did you know it was time to go?" And both of them basically said, "If you think about it more than 2 or 3 times a week, it's probably time to go." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm going to retire." It was just, I was a master sergeant. I was high enough in rank that, I was in charge of, I was working at the Headquarters Air Combat Command. I was the one writing policy instead of out there enforcing policy. I've never been a politician. I don't like being in a political situation, because I have never been a yes sir, no sir, ass kiss kind of guy, and that's one reason why I never made it above master sergeant, because I had a tendency to tell people what I thought when I thought it. And
so you'd moved beyond installs and things like that.
Right. I was no longer in the field or in a position where I was in charge of a shop and I could go out in the field with the guys and do training and show them what I knew, and instead I was sitting behind a desk writing,
How many years previous? I mean, just you don't have to be exact, of course, but I mean, how many years had you been working in that sort of setting?
About 1.5 years.
About 1.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When I left Panama, we were closing down the canal to give it back to the Panamanians, and I PCS'd from there. And when I was down there, I was the NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge of the shop, and we maintained all of the communication systems in all of the embassies in Central and South America. And we closed down, gave everybody, that was kind of the birth of everybody has their own satellite phones. Up until that point, every embassy had their own comm center to communicate back to the States. Well, we started eliminating all that.
The technology has started changing.
Right. So we got rid of the antiquated radio equipment and gave every embassy deck commander, because there's Marines at every embassy, gave all of them TACSAT phones, so they could just click and they're talking to a satellite who's talking to the States, and we cleaned out all the equipment and then closed down the canal, took all of our equipment out of the Panama and gave the Air Force bases and the Army bases and Navy bases back to, the Panamanians. And I came back to the States and went from that kind of an environment where I had 10 guys working for me. I was, had to look out for their welfare all the time, keep the jobs going, scheduling, budgeting, and everything else, and I got stuck behind the desk.
Somewhat hands-on too.
Yeah,
There.
it was all hands-on,
Yes.
and then all of a sudden I'm, you know,
Mhm.
this is what you will do, this is how you do it, and this is why.
Mhm. Okay. Well, about what year was that?
2000,
Okay.
1999, 2000, I came back.
Okay. All right. You've already touched on this a little bit, but is there anything else you'd like to say about your transition back into civilian life?
It's a lot harder than people think,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I mean, if you've got a family somewhere that has a business, you walk out of the military, you walk right back into the business,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Not all military jobs equate to a civilian job,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Some, a lot more than others, you know? I mean, if you're military physician, military medical career field,
Uh-huh.
you're right in,
Yes.
you know? Military police, you know, you have to step out, you're trying to find a job that equates, you know. Most police departments are homegrown, you know, they draw from their local community, so
Mm-hmm.
suddenly coming into a community, you may or may not get a job
Unless you were part of that.
unless
prior.
you're part of that community prior to, you know, like you went home,
Mhm.
home, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not the transition that everybody thinks is just, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you're back to a civilian. It doesn't work that way.
Uh-huh. Okay. Have you made use of any of the VA services since you've retired?
Yes and no. I mean, I've got my medical, so I use the VA system, you know, for medical purposes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
injuries that were sustained during, you know, my time in the service.
Uh-huh.
But when I came in, the additional education benefits were called under VEAP,
Uh-huh.
Veterans Education Administration Program, and it was you put in a buck, they put in a buck, you know. But when we were applying for this, even the people who were supposedly pushing this system said it's no good,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I didn't put any money into it. And then, like 6 years later, they did away with VEAP. They went to the GI Bill again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had the first GI Bill, and they went to the Montgomery GI Bill, and then they revised it again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I didn't get any education benefits out of it,
Mhm.
out of the military. You know, but because of injuries, you know, my back, my knee, my shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, I'm eligible for vocational rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm. And those are all on the job injuries
Right.
and work related. Okay. This might be hard to answer, but would you do anything differently? I mean, looking back on it all.
In my military career,
Yes.
yeah, maybe a couple things. Would have pushed harder a couple times to. I mean, I made rank really fast. I made master sergeant in 12 years,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a feat in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But after I made master, I kind of went into that coast mode,
Uh-huh.
you know, because I was in a position that I wanted to be in. I was in charge of, but still able to work with,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the men and women that I had under me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, once you make senior, you kind of put yourself behind a desk. And if you make chief, you're definitely behind a desk,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And once I made master, I was just kind of
Content.
content. Yeah, that's the word right there.
Okay. All right. I know you may not have any of these instances, but since you brought up the men and women under you, is there any comments you'd like to make throughout any experiences maybe that you had that's worth noting with women in the military during the time you were in?
No, I mean, just like everybody else, you know, I've worked with and worked for a couple of women that, you know, I mean, I've lost track of them. I wouldn't be surprised if the one woman's a governor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, by now, because, I mean, you know, hardworking, dedicated, and it's just like the guys though, you know, and then you get one or two that, I don't know, I thought the one young lady that worked with us for a while, I think she had it in her head that because she was a woman, she got over, you know, she got away with doing less, or, you know, was entitled to special treatment for some reason, you know, but you're in a position where, you know, your duty is your duty, you know, so, just like everybody else, you know, you had one or two bad ones didn't equate to everybody being bad, you know,
Yes.
but, I mean, I'm glad we have women in the military.
Okay. All right. Is there
I
any?
wouldn't have met my wife if it wasn't that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any advice that you would give to individuals that are considering entering the military or that may be in the military currently?
For anybody who's interested in joining the military, do it with your eyes open. Be knowledgeable of what you're getting into before. You know, don't just say, okay, sure, this sounds like fun, and go do it. You know, make a informed decision. A, just going in period, and B, with the branch that you're going into. You know, just because your father was a Marine doesn't mean you have to be a Marine. You know, but if you want to serve, there's other ways and other, you know. And for those people who have served, thank you. But use it to your benefit. You know, don't just go through it, you know, like you're, you know, filling in blocks and then expect something out of it when you get out. Use it to your advantage. Take all the training that they offer while you're in,
Okay.
and then when you step out, use that to your advantage.
Okay. All right. Is there anything that you'd like to add at all?
No, not really. I mean, when you spend most of your adult life, you know, when I stepped out the door at the age of 41, that's all I knew was the military. You know, you enter right out of high school at the age of 18, and you spend 21 years in the military. When you step out the door, that's all you knew. You know, so would I have traded any of that time? You miss out on family. I lost 3 of my grandparents while I was overseas. You know, wasn't here for that. My daughter grew up while I was on the road. You know, I missed out on that. Birthdays, holidays, you know, it's a sacrifice, and it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't trade any of it.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking time to do this interview, and I especially want to thank you for your service to our country, sir.
Oh, I thank you.
Thank you.